Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at the beginning of 2044 to 2045 free agency. If you're enjoying the series, would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, like our videos, and always love to hear your comments on what we're doing, both good and bad, down below. Doesn't mean I'm going to change what I'm doing, but I always do like to get different perspectives from people. So appreciate anything you can do to engage further with the channel. And we've got to engage further with these Pittsburgh Pirates. Made some big moves thus far this offseason, even though, as I mentioned, free agency is only starting today. We're able to up our scouting and development budgets a little bit from where they were last year. And we still have about $10 million for free agents, but no money available for extensions because right now our salary obligations are less than $80 million, but we're going to be over $110 million next year. And that is for multiple reasons. Some of our good young players like Mike Wright, Ricky Rios, and most notably Henry Gonzalez are kind of moving from minimum level contracts next season to spicier arbitration numbers. And then we also made two new additions this offseason. We traded away our longtime ace, Tony Santana, who is due to make $18 million. And we didn't think we were going to get $18 million of value out of him. That's what enabled us to open up some of the money that we still have left. And we also used that money, and in the case of the trade for Bobby Guzman, used Santana himself to bring on Bobby Guzman, who's going to be our new second baseman. I'm going to make about $4.6 million this year. He's in line for a big raise next year. And then we also traded away several prospects for third baseman Willie Madrano, who's going to make about $4.2 million, but also in line for a big raise next year. And same thing for Ethan Mingo, Luis Flores, and our shortstop Tony Cota, in addition to our new ace, Luis Longoria. So that is why our salary obligations are going to be so high next year. And that definitely limits what we're going to be able to do in free agency, because we're going to probably have to find someone who will be willing to sign a one-year contract. Now, we could kind of trick the game if we want to strip our scouting and development budgets down to almost nothing. That would give us a little bit of money to sign one player to an extension. But honestly, with the way that our if I could speak and type at the same time, with the way that our salary obligations next year are going to increase so dramatically, you can see that even if we took $35 million combined out of our scouting and development budgets, that just gives us $11 million for potential extensions. But it is at least a little trick that we can potentially play if there's someone who we are wanting to bring on board but unable to sign because of the salary constraints that we are operating under. Fortunately, with the additions of the new second baseman and third baseman, I feel like our infield is set. I feel like we're set at catcher, bringing Ibarra back, and then it's just a matter of whether Key Rose is back as his backup, or we promote Chris Rodriguez from AAA, 24-year-old who was our second-round draft pick back in 2039. Respectable defensively, a good personality, and looks like he can hold his own, hopefully, as a major league hitter. Hit 257 in AAA this past season. You can see he's hit 10 homers a year through each level of baseball over the last 3 seasons. So kind of know what we're getting out of him as far as the home run power. But he could very well end up being our backup next year instead of Q Rose. I think he's definitely has a better bat. His glove is probably not quite as good, Although, his ability's a little higher, his arm's a little worse. But I think his arm is definitely better, and we do have choices because Quiroz also still has 2 option years left, as does Mr. Rodriguez. So feel like we're set at infield, feel like we're set at catcher, feel like we're set in the starting outfield, and we've got a backup or two. With the pitching staff, it's going to be what these youngsters can do. Sal Valadez, Bobby Astorga, Felix Bath. See what they can do at the major league level, and then see if Juan Bin Daoud can continue to contribute. I don't know why that was such a tongue twister for me. See if he can continue to contribute at the major league level, and if some of those guys can contribute also, then that kind of fills out our rotation. So thinking about what we need and looking at this team, right now Henry Gonzalez is slotted in to play first base for us, which he'd be fine at. He's 6'3", he'd be acceptable there, but he is a acceptable defensive outfielder also. But with Mr. Flores out with that ruptured MCL, when he comes back, he should be our everyday first baseman, most likely, which will push, in all likelihood, Mr. Gonzalez back into the outfield, and probably mean that Alex Racho, if he makes the team next year, and he's getting to the point where he doesn't have that much more development to go through, but a .213 batting average in AAA this year and a .257 batting average in the majors make me question whether the number 49 prospect in baseball is quite ready for the big stage, but he probably is. So we'll have to find a spot for him when Flores comes back. But when I'm looking at this team, we've got Arellano is our center fielder who's a switch hitter. Ramon Herrera, a backup outfielder, is a left-hander. We've got a switch hitter in our backup catcher, Mario Quiroz, who may not even make the team. And then we've got Gonzalez as a left-handed bat. So it's conceivable that only Gonzalez and Arellano, the switch hitter, are in the starting lineup. In fact, it's not conceivable. That's the way it will be. So I feel like if we're going to do anything in free agency, we want to find a left-handed bat. And we can't afford to bring back Alex Palacio, and we wouldn't want to since he's wrecked anyways. We can't afford to bring back Alex Vasquez because he's looking for over $20 million. But we can potentially afford to bring back the left-handed hitting Vinny Tomei. Can see he was a pretty perennial all-star at one point. He's 34 years old, going to be 35 before the season starts. And after really raking over the first 10 years of his major league career, these last 2 years have not been special. So that makes me think that he's probably pretty close to done. But you look at his ratings against right-handed pitchers, and he still should be a pretty useful hitter against righties. Do we bring him on board and have him serve as a first baseman or designated hitter for us against right-handers and hope that we can get somewhat better OPS plus and WRC plus production out of him if he's not facing lefties anymore? I guess would be interesting to take a look at those splits to let us know. So he hit .227 this year with a 94 OPS plus and 97 WRC plus. Against right-handed pitching was a little better, but not much. Kind of a league average OPS plus and a little bit better WRC plus. So he wasn't great. Did have 24 doubles and 16 homers and 430 at-bats against righties. I was hoping that the differential would be a little more significant than that, quite honestly, because I do worry that he's just so slow at this point that certainly negates the fact to some extent that gap power is one of his best skills. Positively, he still did draw a lot of walks, 77 walks in 572 at-bats, so still knows how to work the count a little bit, doesn't strike out much, so he makes contact. The issue, as we've talked about, is even at his age, he's looking for $8 million a year for 4 years. I'm going to just throw a lowball offer out to him to get the conversation started. And we'll do a 2-year deal with a team option because I'm pretty sure he won't go for a 1-year deal. Hey, and if he makes the All-Star team, we'll happily give him a bonus. So average of $7 million a year for 2 years, but it's really a 1-year, $6.8 million contract when all is said and done. And he's willing to think about it. So it may be a situation where reuniting with Vinny Tomei, who we had traded away from the Kansas City Royals about 12 seasons ago when we were still the GM of that team, and now in the late stages of his career, is he the bat that will help get these Pirates to a World Series rather than an early exit from the playoffs? And you may remember from our last episode that we did make a minor league contract offer to Se-Da, a middling prospect from Taiwan. Good personalities, durable, looks like he could be a relatively cheap fifth outfielder down the line. And you may also remember how intrigued I was by the starting pitcher from Cuba who's coming over, Sergio Alvarez. He's supposedly looking for about $19 million, so probably out of our price range. We only have low scouting accuracy on him, so I don't want to just jump at it, because it seems to me, based on my experience, a lot of times with these free agents from other countries, particularly when they're in their 30s, their ratings oftentimes seem to look better than the way they actually perform on the field. So if we are going to totally change the direction of our season 2 to 3 weeks from now, when we do have a better scouting report, and assuming he's still available, we want to make sure that we're at least going in with the best information possible, thinking that regardless of what our scout says, he may not ultimately be as good as we think he is. But he looks on paper, or actually on a screen, as if he could be a pretty interesting pitcher. But I don't think he's going to be a bargain at around $19 million. And it's conceivable that he's gone before we even get that scouting report, given that we don't have the money to really bring him on board without completely disrupting our scouting and development. Not going to break my heart if he ends up signing before we even get that scouting report, given that part of our reset is giving a real opportunity this year to a lot of those young pitchers that I talked about. Well, was not really expecting this. I thought that Se-Da might come back to us and say he wanted a major league contract, but apparently the Lincoln Salt Dogs have made a very compelling offer to him. I think we'll come back to him once more with a minor league contract with major league option, just to the major league minimum, so it's really not all that exciting for him, but he can opt for free agency. But I think that he's going to realize that in AA or wherever he ends up, he's probably up against it a bit. But we'll ask him for a response to that and see if we can bring him on board at that level. And Seida did like the option to opt out after 30 days if we don't give him a major league contract. So looking at his ability, probably going to try to start him off in Double-A, see what he looks like there. We'll also have him in camp at the majors during spring training, but would be very surprised if he makes the team. Vinny Tobey likes our offer at this point, so that's good. And the winter meetings have begun. Which means that we've got to figure out our season ticket pricing. You can see that we were selling out a lot of games at the end of last year. That's because of the huge boost in fan interest we got from bringing on Tomei and Vasquez and Palacios. When we lose at least 2 out of those 3 players, and possibly all 3 of them, as well as a couple other free agents out of our bullpen, our fan interest is going to take a big hit down. So even though we were selling out those, and we were also in the midst of a great pennant race at the time with a close to 600 winning percentage for the season, my hope is that we're going to be just as competitive again this year, but I don't think there are, excuse me, any guarantees that we're going to be that competitive. So I've dropped the price down to $17 for season tickets, which is still above the $16 that we were at this point a year ago. But I think that's the number we're going to go with. Would certainly like it if we could sell over 10,000 season tickets and at least make some progress on that metric compared to last season at a higher price. And we do have our scouting report on Sergio Alvarez, but he's also already signed with the Blue Jays. Looks like $16.8 million a year for 5 years. So definitely a fully valued contract for a guy who's going to be in his mid to late 30s during that contract. Looks kind of as he did when we had low scouting accuracy. The OSA likes his movement even better. Obviously would love to have a guy like this on the team, but I do feel that with Longoria, Gonzalez, and Montoya, our top 3 is pretty solid. And then between holdovers like Wright and Gaona, and then Juan Bin Daoud, Valadez, Astorga, and Bath, I feel like we've got the guys to mix and match the back end of the rotation, and especially out of those 4 young pitchers, hopefully 1 or 2 of them become more than a 4th starter kind of player over time. So it would have been nice to have him, but it was just not realistic given that we do want to ensure that we continue to invest in our scouting and development, which is, as you see if you're looking closely, I haven't had as high as I initially did. Want to have a little flexibility for free agents if there's someone cheap coming through. You can see that we are past the winter meetings, and even with the higher prices, right now we're expected to sell 12.4 thousand season tickets. That's probably a good thing that we haven't started losing these free agents yet, because when that fan interest starts dipping down significantly, when the likes of Palacio and Vasquez go elsewhere, the pace of projected season tickets will probably slow, but hopefully we can sell a lot before those guys officially leave us. And speaking of players leaving us, finally started with Mario Tolka, who we had picked up in a trade with the Reds a couple years ago. Veteran pitcher that we just couldn't afford to keep. He had been very successful for us the last couple years, but you can see he's making $10 million as a 35-year-old reliever. Signed a 2-year deal with the Reds or the Cardinals, so another one of our pitchers goes to our arch rival, and we'll take a look at the hit from that. And it was a 3-point hit to fan interest, so certainly not optimal, but probably not as big as the hits that we're going to take when Vasquez and Palacio move on. And we've made our big free agent signing of the offseason. Vinny Tomei is going to be with us. So he is going to be certainly our starting first baseman at the beginning of the year, because we talked about Flores. He's still recovering from that ruptured MCL. He's got another 3 to 4 months of recovery time. It's already December 19th. So he's going to miss most, if not all, of spring training and probably need a little bit of a rehab assignment in the minors before he's ready to go. So will be good to have Tomei playing first base at least to start the season. And then, as I mentioned, I still do see him as either a first baseman or a DH every day against righties for us down the line. The scouting report on him is still decent. Defensive marvel. Take a walk if he doesn't get a pitch to hit, and should have no trouble in a starting role. So he is not what he was a few years ago, but my hope is through judicious use of him and only requiring him to regularly play against right-handed pitching, we can maybe juice a little bit more offense out of him. And at the very least, having him on board gives our offense potentially a little more balance between left-handed and right-handed pitching, or left-handed and right-handed batting, facing against right-handed or left-handed pitching. Didn't get any fan interest bump from bringing him on board, but there just weren't a ton of options that we could actually afford, and I felt like there's a chance that Tomei is going to have a bounce back year if we use him the right way. We needed a left-handed bat, and I feel like with him at first base and the additions we made at second base with Guzman and third base with Medrano, we're going to be a better offensive team than we were last year, and we're also probably a little bit better defensively overall, which is another area that we did need to improve. We're obviously not going to extend Alex Vasquez, so hopefully we can at least improve our defensive efficiency, and not really to make Mr. Nutting happy. I just don't want to have that bad a defense behind our pitching staff when we're trying to win with pitching and defense. And as we get ready for the Rule 5 draft, I have a few players that we may need to add to the 40-man roster, and obviously we've got tons of room on it at this point. Danny Calez is a third-round draft pick from 4 years ago. Hit only 248 in Double-A this year, but still profiles as a player who could potentially be a pretty decent offensive player, only 22 years old. He's the type of guy that if we saw available in the Rule 5, we would definitely pick somebody like him up to be a fifth outfielder. So we're not going to risk losing him and put him on the 40-man. A few other young prospects with a little bit of talent. Jaden Godfrey is an excellent defensive prospect, great speed, was our first-round pick back in 2040. He hasn't even developed as well as Callis yet. He hit just 239 this past year in A-ball. But the profile is still of a player that I think could be a pretty useful, certainly fourth outfielder with that great defense and the speed. He's never going to walk a lot, which isn't great, but he's a good enough potential contact and gap power hitter that with that speed, he should be an extra base machine. I don't think anyone would take him from us, but given that we've got room on the 40-man, there's really no reason to risk it. Vinny Telez, 12th round pick in 2041, not the greatest personality. Looks like he might be a back end of the rotation or back end of the pitching staff type of person eventually. If we lose him, we lose him. Jonathan Thompson is a 23-year-old, was a fifth rounder in 2040. Boy, that was a big draft for outfielders for us. He honestly looks like he probably is the most major league ready of those outfielders, even though he's the least heralded at this point. Hit 272 in high A ball last year with 28 home runs. I'm going to put him on the 40 man simply because we've got space there. I don't know that anyone would grab him from us, but I also don't want to risk losing him. Then Luis Carrillo has a little bit of upside, at least according to our scout, but with that movement and that control, if somebody wants to keep him on their roster all season, more power to them. Kind of taking a look, there's a fair amount of guys with 2.5 star overall potential. Most of them are in their late 20s, early 30s. Did think about retaining Dave Casanova, like his glove, but he hit only 222 in AA this past year. Certainly doesn't look like he's going to have a bat that's really a major league bat. So if somebody wants to take him, they are welcome to. And Alex Vasquez, as expected, is gone. Fan interest almost crashed. Signed for only $7.3 million with the Rockies. He was supposedly looking for like $20 million a year. Guess I should have reached out to him, but I do feel like one of the things you can definitely, from my view, take advantage of knowing how to play this game, and you can even take advantage of the AI in some situations. But I have found that when there's a player who says that they're looking for 20 some odd million dollars in, on the main free agent screen in terms of their demand, and then they end up signing for a fraction of that. I think if we had offered him even $10 million a year, he wouldn't have even engaged with us. At least I've found that in the past. Maybe I'm talking my own book at this point, but I have kind of found that the AI-controlled teams are more likely to be able to sign someone, particularly in a time like December when free agency has only been going for a month, for significantly less than they're looking for. I think it's pretty hard for a human-run team to do that again, particularly in the first month or two of free agency. If any of you have had other experience with that, please let me know down below. For only a little more than we're going to be spending on Vinny Tomei, you can argue should have went with Vasquez, particularly because he's so popular. But they're pretty similar batting profiles at this point. Vasquez is definitely better, and he's definitely a more accomplished player, and he was also definitely more successful with us the 2 months that we had him last year. But I'm really going to be more disappointed by the hit that we take to fan interest from him going. Supposedly it almost crashed. Let's see how bad that was. 7-point hit. And I did keep records on these things because I was so obsessed with fan interest last season. So we got a 9-point boost when we traded for Vasquez in July, and we just lost 7 points to fan interest when he left us in December. I don't have any complaints with that. I think that both of the moves were probably way too dramatic, but at least we didn't lose everything that we picked up with him, given that he did help kind of get our team into a better spot. Now, the scary thing, though, is that Palacios, we got plus 10 in terms of fan interest. So when he does finally sign with somebody, we could find ourselves back in the low 60s in terms of fan interest, particularly given that it's unlikely we make any other significant acquisitions this offseason, unless there's someone in the bargain bin 2.5 months from now. And speaking of Palacio, he is gone too. Wow, he got $23 million to go back to the Giants is a 40, soon to be 41-year-old who's wrecked physically. Obviously, he has had a Hall of Fame caliber career, but a 2-year deal at $23 million a year for him at this point in his career seems very aggressive. But let's check the damage. I told you we got plus 10 when he joined us, and we got minus 7 when he left us, so down to 66 in fan interest. So honestly, with the fact that net we're a little better off in fan interest than when we brought on Vasquez and Palacio, even though we did take big hits when they both left. As much as I rant about the fan interest system, I can't really rant against those results. And we are going to be picking at number 27 in the Rule 5 draft. So let's find out who is on board for the Pirates. And we did lose a player, 34-year-old third baseman Israel Cazares. Like his glove, not much of a bat. I forget how we picked him up. I want to say I think he was probably a minor league free agent. Yeah, we signed him as a minor league free agent before last season. He spent the year in A-ball for us. Basically had him as a good influence on the system with a good work ethic. He was never going to be in our long-term plans. Obviously, if we could have kept him in the system, would have been happy to. But if the Rockies want to try to keep that bat up for the whole season, more power to them. And I've got a few ideas for the Rule 5 draft, but want to see what our scouting director recommends. A couple interesting players just to look at. Stephen Fulmer here, look at this. He has the most incredible stuff in the world, off the charts fastball, great sinker, but the movement and control are just awful. Looks like he has gotten a couple opportunities with Cleveland. He was horrible in 2042, despite an insane 119 strikeouts and 57 and a third innings. But then he was actually pretty good with a 2.45 ERA, 97 strikeouts and 47 and 2/3 innings when he got his walks under control. And I guess for him, the home runs under control compared to the 20 that he had given up in 57 and a third innings. Certainly not the type of player that we would be picking up, but he doesn't look like a bad player. From my perspective, there's a little more interest among the batters. You can see Sean Barley is out there, our former Rookie of the Year, who we got rid of last season. I don't see us having a major league spot for him, particularly with the fact that we've now signed Vinny Tomei. There are some players with some potential, though, that are interesting to me. One is a familiar name, Jose Donoso, who was one of the guys that we traded away just a few months ago to bring on Medrano at third base. Really kind of shocked that I think it's Houston who has his rights, that they didn't put him on the 40-man roster after he was one of the important players in that trade. We did give up 5 prospects, and none of them were exceptional, but Donoso to me was one of the better ones in that deal. So there's an argument to just bring him back. I don't think he'll ultimately make our roster, but it would be kind of funny to try to bring him back. And I also am kind of intrigued by Jaden Callaway, 22-year-old former first-round draft pick in 2041. He's durable, he's fast, he's decent defensively, and it looks like ultimately he could have a major league bat. The issue is that he's never been above high A ball, and I think it's going to be hard for us to keep him on the team. But thought that both of those guys were kind of interesting. Let's see what the scouting director thinks. He thinks we should go with Juan Alarcon, guy who's coming off of surgery to remove bone chips. 32-year-old who is making $1.4 million. I really don't like the movement. Now, granted, he is a ground ball pitcher, which probably helps him limit the home runs a little bit, but he still gave up 27 in 93 innings and 14 in 46 and 2/3, 5 in 26 and 2/3. Yeah, as much as I love Jordan Cavaneria, we will not be going with Mr. Alarcon. I think that we are going to pick Jaden Callaway. Again, I don't think he's going to make our 26-man roster unless we have some injuries, but it gives us a little bit of optionality to add someone who was a pretty highly regarded player for nothing if we do have some injuries in spring training and decide that having him as our number 5 outfielder makes sense. Fans pleased with that. Well, they won't be pleased when we send him back, but wow, he must be pretty popular. Got a bump of what, a point? Oh, I guess it's only a 1-point bump, but better than a 1-point move in the other direction. So we'll continue on with the draft. Scouting director recommends we do nothing. Honestly, out of spite, I think I'm going to take Jose Donoso back. I don't think we're going to be able to keep either of these outfielders, but it's another free option for us, essentially. He did hit well last year, batted over 300 between single A and high A. I just don't think he's quite ready for the majors, especially with a team that's going to hopefully be competing like we do, or like we hopefully will be. But I'm going to at least bring him into camp. The worst thing is that we send him back at the end of spring training. And that's about it. I don't see us doing anything else. I finally agree with Cavanero that it's not time to do anything else, so we will finish off the rest of the draft. And you can see we picked up Callaway and Donoso, and then we did lose Israel Cazares in the draft. So looks like the Angels got hit hard there in the second round. The Astros got, or in the third round, the Astros got hit hard in the second round. And Phillies and the Cardinals got hit hard in the first round. So always good to see the Cardinals losing talent. And with the Rule 5 draft complete, fan interest is at 67, and I think there's really just one big potential hit that we're still going to have at this point. If I go back to November, actually that's not going to have a list of all of the players that we lost. But obviously we lost Vasquez, we lost Tolka, we lost Palacio. The last player that I think we could take some type of hit on would be Elijah Helton, who could end up having a negative impact on our fan interest because he's very popular. But, maybe a couple point hit to fan interest. So if we kind of have a base case of 64, 65 fan interest after losing Helton, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you can see that the pace and expectation for season ticket sales have really slowed down over the last couple of weeks with the significant fan interest hits that we did take with the losses of Vasquez and Palacio particularly. So we're going to sim ahead at least a little bit more in this episode, because if you've been watching for a long time, even perhaps dating back to our Kansas City playthrough, you know that we're still waiting to find out whether Bobby Witt Jr., who was the cornerstone of 5 world championship teams in Kansas City, is going to be in the Hall of Fame. I believe this is his 4th time on the ballot this year. His first year, he led in votes, but did not have the 75% to get elected. He dropped back in his second season, and I believe he was up about 67% last year, his 3rd year on the ballot. So will Bobby Witt Jr. and his 80-plus WAR, his 5 World Series championships, and about 10 All-Star awards, about 10 Gold Gloves, a Rookie of the Year, a couple of Silver Sluggers, and I believe 4 or 5 playoff series Most Valuable Player awards. Will that finally be enough to get him into the Hall of Fame? We're going to find out in about a week and a half. And it is time to find out whether Bobby Witt Jr. is a Hall of Famer. And he is not, and he is definitely moving in the wrong direction, down to 52.6% in his 4th year on the ballot. Only Fernando Tatis Jr., who had an incredible career. We will get out of the splits that we had, but you look at the number of years he led the league in home runs was absolutely insane. A 912, I think that's a record. Almost 2,300 RBIs, 285 career average. You can see 7 MVP awards. Obviously an incredible season. Spent all except the final season with the Padres. So no shock that he went in. I am surprised at how volatile the vote is in the game with Bobby Witt Jr. You can see he was at 63.7% the first year, and as I mentioned, that was the highest of anybody, although obviously he wasn't close to the 75. Dropped below 50. Last year got up to 67.6, and then this year drops by 15 points. So I get that there are always new players coming on, but quite honestly, with the exception of Tatis Jr., Trey Sweeney and Logan Henderson were the highest other first-year players. So it doesn't make tons of sense to me that Bobby Witt Jr.'s results would be that volatile. Honestly, I'm not expert on the Hall of Fame voting, but I would think a pattern like that, where you're down 15 points, up 20 points, down 15 points over your first 4 years on the ballot, that type of volatility, I would think in the modern voting era is pretty unprecedented. But it is what it is. Although he's got that 80.6 career WAR, and as I mentioned, a Rookie of the Year, boatload of Gold Gloves, boatload of All-Star appearances, 5 World Series championships, a couple Silver Sluggers. One of them is hidden somewhere, but yeah, there were a couple. And actually, it was only 4 series. Or no, there's one down. Yeah, there's that 2027. So yeah, it was 4 playoff series MVPs, maybe not 5. So maybe I oversold him a little bit, but it looks like the length of his career and the fact that he retired relatively young at the age of just 35, or I guess he was 36 by the time he retired. He was 35 at the start of that last Mickey Mantle-esque season with the Royals. But he is still not in the Hall, and the standards seem to be high. His former teammate Salvador Perez at 50.8%. His numbers have been a lot more consistent over the years, always kind of in that 48 to 59 kind of range. Makes a little more sense. 418 home runs for a catcher who was also pretty solid defensively. Should have some value, but you look at his career WAR of 40. You look at Ronald Acuna Jr. with a career WAR of 73.1, and Carlos Correa at 87.6 is better than the former All-Star from the Royals, Bobby Witt Jr., but Tatis is obviously going to have some insane number. Yeah, almost a 150 WAR for his career. And look at those. He led the league in WAR 7 times. In 6 of those 7 times, it was double digits. So he had an incredible career, but Bobby Witt Jr. also had an excellent career, but at least according to the good folks at Out of the Park Baseball, he is not yet a Hall of Famer. And with that, we will conclude the episode. In our next episode, we will be back with spring training of 2045. We do have a little bit of money still to spend. Will there be some bargains on the market that we can potentially pick up, either in terms of a bat or an arm who can maybe help our team? Kyle Smith's kind of interesting, and his demand is not that much at this point. He's a reliever at this point. But he's been a pretty darn productive pitcher over the course of his major league career. 74 FIP minus. He's only 32 years old. Now, he is wrecked physically. He would be a proven arm for the bullpen, but we'll give that some thought between now and the next episode. We'll take a look at some of these other guys. There may be an opportunity to help the team a little bit on the margin, but I certainly don't want to sign more than one pitcher, because we do want to be able to give some of those youngsters an opportunity. Willie Arenales, another guy who had been in the Kansas City system back in the day, does not look like he's all that great at this point. Or no, he was in the Pittsburgh system. Okay. Yeah, you can tell that I have been playing this. I guess I am now in my 8th year as general manager of the Pirates, getting ready to come up for our 8th season. So I'm thinking back several years, and I'm still thinking back to Kansas City, but it's been the better part of a decade since I was the general manager of the Royals, so I guess I should get over that at some point. Juan Contreras is extremely popular. Don't want to totally play that game, and he doesn't really look like he'd be somebody who could help our staff all that much, so he's not that interesting. If we're going to bring somebody on board, we want it to be somebody who's really going to be able to help us. But if we can get a bargain over the next couple of months, we will certainly think about it. Ooh, and how did I turn on that filthy OSA scouting? I don't want that. Yeah, I want to know what Jordan Cabanera thinks. Danny DeAndre had a really great career, but he is a shell of what he used to be, 40 years old, wrecked physically. Again, you could sign him for the popularity boost, but I don't know whether I want to get back into that hamster wheel of going up and down on that. Although I guess in the hamster wheel, the hamster's never really going anywhere. The wheel is moving. So perhaps our fan interest is on that wheel. But we will figure out whether we want to make a final signing or two, try to shop in the bargain basement bin over the last couple of months before the season starts. We'll figure that all out in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.